Hello Booktubians. Today I'm going to be talking about one of my most cherished and childhood stories, Bone. This is a massive graphic novel collection of all the 9 volumes of Bone. It goes from Boneville all the way to the Crown of Thorns. This is one of my childhood stories, and it ranges from childhood Disney kind of wholesome charm with a little bit of action, a little bit of danger, a lot of comedy, a lot of wholesome character moments, to a straight up war story, kind of akin to like Lord of the Rings almost, in terms of scale and proportion. It's one of the weirdest stories in the sense that I don't expect something like this to ever exist in the way it does, where it's a graphic novel for kids and then it ends up being something that I would not have expected in a kid's story. It's not to say there's anything too graphic, it's more like I'm talking people getting cut in half. I'm talking large dynastic struggles between noble siblings. I'm talking weird ethereal lore with dreams and war and sort of power struggles and creation myths and dragons. It's just a really weird story where it ends up in a very interesting place that I would say that is why it kind of holds up, at least for me, even to this day. Because if it remained kind of the first 2 stories, and I'll go through each of the volumes kind of as a retrospective as to what made these books really great. But if it stayed like the first 2 books, I'm sure most people would read it with the same charm that they would read something like Calvin and Hobbes, or which it has very similar kind of, I guess, intelligent, fun kid humor, not so out of scope as Garfield, like not so odd and kind of random as Garfield, but definitely Calvin and Hobbes is the best comparison I can think of, at least right now. I didn't really grow up reading too many graphic novels. I read stuff like Tintin, obviously this, Calvin and Hobbes, Garfield, but I think that's about it. I read a bit of the Amulet series, but I didn't get into that much as I did, obviously, Bone. Bone, to me, stands even to this day as one of the few graphic novels in that era of when I was a kid reading these things that holds up as a concrete, finished and just solid narrative. I can't think of anything else. I think Amulet was also like that, but it didn't really capture me as much as Bone did. So I'm going to go over all the 9 volumes of Bone, what made them individually great, what kind of tone shifts they made, status quo shifts they made. So this is going to have spoilers, so just bear that in mind. But honestly, even with the spoilers, I would say if you are spoiled or if you don't plan on reading, I do actually think you should pick this up because it's a graphic novel. It's only 9 volumes. I think as an adult especially, you can kind of blitz through this in a day. I would not be surprised if you sit down for literally 6 hours, you can finish the entirety of Bone. So starting out with volume 1 or book 1, Out from Boneville. This is your tutorial for this series. It introduces the 3 main characters: Phone Bone, Phony Bone, and Smiley Bone. Yeah, those are the names, and they're from a town called Boneville. You can very much see this is meant for kids. You kind of forget that their names are so tacky by the time the plot really gets in, kicks into gear. You start, and I'll get to that, but this story is simply about they've been kicked out of Boneville, and they are looking for a place to call home. They're lost, they're stranded, they're out of food and water, and they're kind of hopeless a little bit. Not Smiley Bone, though. Smiley Bone, as the name suggests, is always the optimist. In fact, he's also the idiot of the 3. These are very much the 3 stooges, I guess. You have Phone Bone, who's the straight man. He's the everyman. He's the kind of the normal one of the 3, if you will, because his biggest things are just kind of very traditional fantasy protagonist things. He's loyal, he's brave, he's caring. It's pretty easy to like him, especially reading as a kid. Phony Bone, as the name suggests, he is phony. He's greedy, he's cunning, he's often a liar, He just wants money. His biggest thing is he's super greedy, and the only thing, and this is the thing that makes him not a villain so much so as in more of an anti-hero maybe, is that his one rule that he never crosses is that he does care about his cousins, Phone Bone and Smiley Bone. And then Smiley Bone, of course, as I mentioned, is sort of the goofy optimist. He's not the smartest, but he is surprisingly wise at times, and you kind of have to go, are you faking this? But and these three are of course have been kicked out from Boneville, and they are now looking for a home, and they find the home in the primary setting of this entire epic, which is simply known as the Valley. And this valley is made up of normal humans. So you'll notice obviously there's Bone, or the better picture is right here. There's Bone. He's not human. It's weird because the Boneville, where he originates from, they have a lot of the modern human customs. So they have Moby Bone. They have things that you wouldn't expect a fantasy adventure to have, but it's kind of just put on the hush-hush. They reference things with a slight bone-related twist, so you kind of feel like they're almost like the humans, and the humans are something else. But no, they enter a valley with humans. You can see Thorn in the picture there. And the humans are sort of this scattered collection of tribes and villages with a very deep and tragic past that 90% of them are not aware of, with strange things coming back as these bone creatures have entered the valley. Out from Boneville introduces some of the main characters of the valley, such as Thorn, as I mentioned, her Grandma Ben, who is just, this is one of those things you'll have to take at face value. She is superpowered. Like, she is like Hulk. Like, she can pick things up with her bare hands. She is indestructible at times. At first, as a kid, you kind of take it as a thing that is a goof, but as with everything in the series, it all actually just is used seriously, you know? And then you meet Barrelhaven, the main village that these people are part of, and that's sort of it. That is the first book. They meet a few dangerous creatures along the way, but they also meet a lot of helpful creatures along the way, along with the mysterious red dragon that seems to always conveniently show up when it is necessary, is always watching, but is never in the main presence because the people don't think dragons exist. And again, that is one of those things that is played up for comedy. So the first, Out from Boneville, and then the second one is Great Cow Race, which is very similar to the first one, but now that these characters are established in this village, Barrelhaven, you get a little bit of the culture of Barrelhaven, and you are seeing these characters interact with the local custom of the Great Cow Race, of which Grandma Ben is a part of and always wins, because she does 10-mile runs every morning. And again, one of those goofy, childish things that just you kind of forget is goofy when it is used in a serious way. Like, she's this superhuman, right? You also get a little bit of this budding romance between Phone Bone and Thorn, and by budding romance, I mean he's pining for her and she doesn't really reciprocate, and they're just friends. So this is the classic, he's kind of in the friend zone. That's the whole thing, right? A lot of village politics, village drama, nothing super serious, but it's starting to pick up because you see these rat creatures that have been a presence since the first one, and they're kind of becoming more bold. They're trying to attack more people. They're using the Great Cow Race as a place to kind of hold their little assault. And again, very comedic, very not threatening, if that makes sense. And that all changes in the third book, Eye of the Storm. Eye of the Storm is the third book, and it is, I think, where the story really picks up. And when I say that, I mean that it is no longer just village politics, village drama, comedy, romance, adventures. It's now starting to cement a plot, a plot is starting to cement into this narrative. The rat creatures are becoming bolder. We're now introduced to a real threat of this massive rat creature, the king of rat creatures, known as King Doc. And he is actively a lethal threat. And that's the big thing. Yeah, they're lethal before, but honestly, as a kid, you're not really thinking about how lethal they are until we see in book 3, the characters are terrified. Grandma Ben is serious. She's no longer the sweet grandma that can totally just lift a boulder and chuck it at you. Now she is scolding these people to get their act together because now they're in serious danger. The reason it's called Eye of the Storm is it's revolving around this massive storm that's blowing through the village, And in this sort of confusion and rainfall, thunder, secrets are starting to being unfolded as Phonebone, Thorn, and Grandma Ben are kind of out in the woods trying to survive as the rat creatures close in on them. The secrets of what this mysterious red dragon is and why she hates him, why she seems to have this massive past that she just doesn't want to tell anyone until the very end, and she does. And Thorn realizes that she's part of something that is much bigger than just this small village. It's a very, you can tell it's a very classic story of you're part of this ancient lineage. I think that some of the subversions, obviously, other than it being a different medium altogether, is that it takes place in a village that is given an entire 2-volume to kind of develop, right? If you take a look at like Wheel of Time, right? It's 5 chapters actually it's 10 chapters, I think, is when 10 chapters is when they leave the Emond's Field, right? In Lord of the Rings, it's always like a chapter or 2, and then 3 is company, and then they leave, right? That's Lord of the Rings. This is like the 3rd book. This is, and I know they're graphic novels, so they go by fast, but as a kid, I read this in 4th grade, right? These things took some time for me in that time. I wasn't the fastest reader. I'm still not the fastest reader. And I was keeping up with all these things, and I would reread them until I got the next one, and so on. And then I think the final one came out a little bit later, and I had to wait for it until I got my hands on it. But as a kid, these felt like a lot longer, and yet it kind of kept me hooked, right? It's not often you'll see the 3rd book is where you get the massive lore drop of you are the dynastic heir of this lost, forgotten kingdom in the valley that most people don't even remember exists anymore because of their seclusion. So this is where we get the first kind of big lore drop. And then we come to book 4, which is Dragon Slayer. Dragon Slayer, I think, is one of my favorites because Dragon Slayer introduces Phony's newest and most boldest strategy to make money. And all the other books, he's always had this little harmless plan. One was to rig the cow race, and the second one, the other one was to, I don't even remember what the 3rd one was, but he always has something going on that's always like kind of low stakes, like rigging a race or scamming some people off of some money. But this one is serious because he says he's a famous dragon slayer, and in fact this red dragon that is being demonized by the village because up until that point they didn't think it was real, he's going to slay the dragon. And he is basically treated like royalty, while from the last book, Phonebone, Thorn, and Grandma Ben are still kind of out in the wild of the valley, fighting for their life, running away. Here we get a confrontation between King Doc, and we see Grandma Ben, for the first time, actually suffer and lose a fight. We see Thorn kind of showcase some of her more brave and warrior instincts, if you will, where she uses the sword to defend Grandma Ben and Phonebone. We see Phonebone's kind of his own little innocent bravery where like he's lost in the woods and he's bleeding from the head, and there's also one of the first times we actually see straight up dripping blood in the artwork. Doesn't sound like a lot, but as a kid, I'm like, whoa, are they allowed to do that? Like, they have blood here. As a kid, it meant something to me seeing these characters bleed for the first time, because it's like when you are reading these books as a kid, these characters are almost untouchable in their own way, even when they have this slapstick comedy humor, right, where they get slammed and they get beaten and whatnot. But it's a different kind of message when blood is spilled, and this is the first time that these characters are actually in danger. No comedy, no slapstick, no, oh, they'll be fine. Like, no, like one of these characters might die. And as a kid, I think that tone shift really meant a lot because it felt like I was reading something that was elevated from a kid's story to an actual story. And as a kid, that means something, You want to pretend like you're a lot older or a lot more mature than people say you are. So, and this book kind of gave you that feeling when you start seeing these characters almost die or suffer or lose. And then it's followed up with Thorn cutting King Doc's arm off. And I'm like, this is amputation. This isn't Star Wars amputation where it's all lightsabers, so everything is cauterized and clean. Not to say that cauterization or amputation is clean, but, that's how it is in Star Wars. But this is, no, straight up, she cuts his arm off, and there's blood dripping. They're all fatigued, scared, terrified, wet from the storm, and hungry. And it's like, this is a massive tonal shift. which is why I love 3 and 4, because it just kind of shocks you with this. On top of this massive plot that Phonybone is doing, where he's going to kill the dragon, which obviously he doesn't want to do, and it ends with the dragon killing ceremony, and he's like, I'm going to actually have to do it, and the dragon's like, yeah, sure, do it, and he's like, come on, leave, escape. The whole plan was that they give me money, I leave with the money, you escape, I don't have to kill anyone. Instead, the dragon's like, no, I'm just going to chill here, because he's a little bit of a memester, if you will. He's always just joking around and making it a little bit harder, but then the village starts burning down. And in the distance, they realize that this is not a joke, this is not a prank, this is not something that they can win. The dragon is on their side, and the rat creatures have burned down the village. And at the end of book 4, a massive status quo is changed. Barrelhaven, that was the village that we've spent so much time in, and it didn't seem really touchable because it's like, you know, it's why the raising of the Shire, or the scourging of the Shire, is so important to the Lord of the Rings story, is that it's some place that we didn't want to feel like was actually touchable, and then it was harmed. And this is the same, I would say, is where when you see the village burning in the distance, they're like in shock of what they've done, which because they all left for this stupid ceremony, and Phonybone is obviously at the center of all this guilt, and it ends with them just saying, we're at war. I can't believe it. We're at war. Like these rat creatures that we've been taking so lightly, they have amassed an army and they have burned everything down. What is happening? Then we get into 5 and 6. So 5 is weird, where it is only on the point of view from Phonebone and Smiley-Bone, who have been separated in this entire journey. And they meet, they're on the borders of all this valley, and they are surviving for their life as they're met with this massive mountain lion creature that is the size of a skyscraper. That is basically, his name is Rockjaw. And Rockjaw is this weird kind of neutral, dangerous creature who has claimed neutrality, but also not really, because he keeps pushing the characters to choose a side. He says he's already chosen a side. I think it's a very interesting, almost philosophical book. Like, this book is weird, right? Aside from all the action of them running away from the rat creatures, from Rockjaw himself whenever he gets angry, learning more about the mystery and the mythos of this valley, they're met with this, and again, bear in mind, this is for kids, so it's not the most philosophically groundbreaking things, but I would say it's strange and also interesting that this is in a kid's book where he's talking to them and forcing them to pick the side, us versus them. There's always a side. If you don't pick a side, you die. And he's like playing with them like a cat would, you know. He's a massive mountain lion. And I don't know, he's a very interesting character, I think. That's always just there, but he always poses like a very difficult question for the main characters, but doesn't outright just kill them, even though he straight up can if he wanted to. And then book 6 is where we get the sort of return to form in terms of what is going on with these characters that have lost their village, right? How are they going to recuperate from this? Old Man's Cave is volume 6. Old Man's Cave is, I think, if Eye of the Storm and Dragonslayer elevate the story and give you the consequences of the hero's actions, in this case Phonybone's actions to get more money, Old Man's Cave reveal even more information about the mysterious Lord of Locusts, who is this hooded figure with a scythe. We finally learn who that person is, and she is, lo and behold, Grandma Ben's sister. This is the sibling power struggle that had started many decades ago, and she has now basically made this weird kind of cult-like persona where she's leading the rat creatures to dominion over the valley, and she starts something in this cave that they are trying to stop, and they fail to stop. Why? Because Phonybone's sort of Phonybone's weird, right? His whole plot was to basically make money and get out with that money off of scamming the people into thinking that he could kill some dragon. He wasn't going to kill a dragon, but in doing so, he both made the valley into this, or rather the village, lose their home, but also they're all alive now. So in a way, unintentionally, he both made their home get destroyed because they were all gone, not there to defend it, but also at the same time, they didn't have the resources or the preparation to defend from such an attack. So he kind of saved all their lives, which is what is interesting about him. He didn't mean to do anything, and the result was that they're all alive. However, Old Man's Cave ends with the ceremony or the ritual that the Lord of Locusts, or in this case, Grandma Ben's sister, wants to complete. And this creates the Ghost Circles in book 7, which I think is one of the darkest books in terms of just what is happening. It is this strangely apocalyptic situation where, because of the ceremony, only certain areas of the world you can actually step on, and they're random, and only Thorn can see them. So Thorn is guiding and taking the leadership role and leading them through this dusty apocalypse, like ashen apocalypse, while on the other side of this little cozy pocket that the villagers of Barrel Haven have found themselves in, led by Lucas, they are basically surviving just barely. We are also introduced in the last few books, and they keep coming back, of this order of warriors, right? And they've been loyal to the dynasty that Grandma Ben belongs to. You'll notice that some of them will pop up in books, and they're just kind of there. They seem to be loyal to Grandma Ben and Thorn, but then Volume 8, which begins with them in the city, is Treasure Hunters, and this is where we get some of the politics and sort of the internal struggle of all of the city life. Essentially, this is the big city, first major city we've ever seen. Barrel Haven's kind of the only settlement that we really see before, and we realize that these people all have refugees coming in because of the Ghost Circles that have been taking lives just for existing. We see this fear, panic, religious sort of authoritative, settlement that has been mandating, or rather outlawing, certain practices, like worshipping dreams and dragons and such. It's stuff that is very mature for, again, this is another one of those elevations, I would say, is that it suddenly takes this realistic and grounded approach to what happens when an entire valley of people are displaced from their homes. Like, you're dealing with refugees, you're dealing with, and there's comedy thrown in there, of course, but it's a very dark story in terms of, like, these people have lost their homes, lost their loved ones, and now the city, which is under this strict iron rule of this mysterious one-armed warrior man, is, he's not letting people in, or if he is, then it's like super tight on what you are allowed to do and not to do. So it's either choose this authoritative dictatorship, or go out into the wilds of the Ghost Circles, where if the Ghost Circles don't kill you, then the rat creatures will. So here we have Phony Bone up to his old shenanigans again, where he believes there's treasure in the city, and the gang is trying to get in the city and get refuge and safety, and it ends in one of the most horrifying ways as a kid, because I had to actually wait after Treasure Hunters to read the next one. And that is, of course, Phone Bone and Thorn getting caught by this religious sect, or I guess anti-religious sect, technically, because they don't like that they're worshipping a certain thing. But point is, militants, and they get absolutely clobbered. And to a point where I thought they died. I thought, as a kid, I had to reread it. I was like, wait, hold on, I was reading too fast. Flip back, and they're just getting beaten, and they get locked up. And that finally brings us to the final conclusion of Bone, which is, of course, Crown of Swords. And Crown of Swords features the final struggle of the city as the Lord of Locusts has gathered her armies and has besieged the city. And it is epic. I mean, it didn't... Well, I guess it did help that I had to wait for this book. It wasn't available right away when I finished Treasure Hunters, and when it became available, it took me a while to get my parents to buy it for me, or wait for it in the library. And it is epic. And this is where some of the most bloodiest scenes are too. Some of the most horrifying war sequences. The battles are awesome. They are beautifully illustrated. This edition right here is black and white, but I read this in full color when I was a kid. But I have to say, even in black and white, I mean, it really does hold up. I love, I can go into the art, and it'll be a whole nother 20-minute video on how good the art is. I can go into the plot and the characters, but this was more just the retrospective and overview of the entire series and why I love it. And the tonal kind of gradient that it presents from book 1 through 9, because book 9, when it ends, it ends in a bittersweet way, which is not something that you would expect from a kid's book. Again, a kid's book should be happily ever after, right? Kids' books should be the king and queen won, and they had a happy life where they made up and they were romantically involved, and they finally said I love you and married, and blah 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 blah. Their kids ruled for centuries to come. This is a bittersweet ending. It's not depressing necessarily. It's it's something that kind of, as a kid, I was satisfied in like how not unsatisfactory it was, but rather how like real it was, you know. And again, as a kid, when you're reading something, you want to feel like you're reading something more mature than it actually is. And when you're given that proof that it is mature, so as a kid, when I finish Bone and I'm left with this feeling of like sadness, but also happiness, but also like, well, yeah, what else would have happened? I guess it really kind of sold the story for me, and that's what makes Bone so amazing. And it starts with this childish, goofy idea of three cousins lost, and then they finding a mystical valley in the distance that doesn't know of their existence. They don't know of theirs. They're talking grasshoppers named Ted and rat creatures that like quiche. It's very, very like goofy things, and by the end you're left with this massive power struggle between long lost dynasties and warriors and different codes of warriors, dragons and dream lords, and Thorn becomes this crazy blur between real and fiction, where she's just straight up defying the laws of physics from all the things that she's learned from her grandma and all the other things. It all just comes together, and then they reference some of those comedic things. They have that comedy from the first book all the way into the last, but it's always so intelligently placed. It's very easy to kind of undermine the emotional aspect and the epic kind of dark aspects of the story by just always being comedic. But the fact that he was able to do this in a kid's book, make it cohesive, make it actually end, and not just like go off on its own little rampage where they just keep coming out with more. It's just such a complete and, dare I say, perfect product. I don't know if I have any real flaws with this. Everything that you would think is a flaw is not a flaw. To me, it fits. And I guess I just wanted I wanted an excuse really to re-experience this, as I talked about this beginning to end. I've been flipping through this and kind of just living through my nostalgia, very just casually, blurring through all the pages, seeing my favorite scenes, some of my favorite panels that take up the whole page. And if you haven't read this and you were kind of just watching or listening to just see what it's about because you don't care about spoilers, honestly, pick this up and just burn through it in a couple days. It's not very hard to get through. And I think you'll come out at the other end appreciating, if not enjoying it, then at the very least appreciating the level of care and focus that went into making something that was meant for kids, this long, graphic novel, good art, good characters, and a very compelling and finished story. But that is sort of my overview of the Bone series and just my retrospective on why I love it. I could talk about this just like Wheel of Time, where I could just talk about this forever, but I'm not going to do that because time is limited. So I really hope you enjoyed, and I hope you give it a shot if you haven't already read it. If you have read it, I hope you enjoyed this trip down memory lane. But thank you for watching, and happy reading.